guys, Lemmy here and welcome back to another art video. It's October and you know it, Inktober is here, and it's time for yet another month full of ink drawings from your favorite artists. Today I'm going to cover a large array of different Inktober themed topics, and I'll talk a bit about my plans for Inktober this year, a little bit about the whole big Inktober controversy that other artists have made videos about and covered, and I'll wrap up by talking a little bit about quitting the challenge so early on. So let's get into it. If you've been following my channel the past 2 years, I've participated in Inktober each year and completed the challenge within the time frame. And this is going to be my 3rd year and the final 31 images that I can fit into this Moleskine sketchbook of mine. And I am really super grateful it's the last Inktober that I can fit into this book, because it is absolutely miserable with ink. This sketchbook has a tendency to bleed through with most inking materials that I do own, and I own quite a few. And yeah, I'm not heavy-handed and I don't put a large amount of ink down on the paper, so it's been horrible. The previous 2 years of Inktober, my goal was to simply complete the challenge of making 1 ink drawing per day for the entire month. I did want to use some brush pens here and there, as I didn't really use them super much and this gave me an excuse to do so. But this year, I kind of wanted to challenge myself to make an image every day using an art supply that I have absolutely no idea how to even use. This year, all my images will be made using dip pens and ink. It was a common thing for me to use all sorts of different inking pens and colored inks in the previous years, but this year I'm going to stick mostly to black and white. Before October started, I used this as an excuse to buy a whole bunch of different dip pen holders and various types and brands of nibs. My goal for this year is to become as knowledgeable as I possibly can with dip pens, and to of course make 1 drawing in ink daily. It's funny to me that I've avoided dip pens for so long, and honestly, now that I've tried these new pens that I bought, I know exactly why I've avoided dip pens like the plague. And that is simply because I was using a dip pen from a really crummy child's art set. And I tried to use it to make lines in a sketchbook that probably didn't have good enough paper to begin with. I mean, it wasn't horrible, but it wasn't the best. And what I made was a total and complete mess. The lines were bleeding and feathering everywhere, and the pen was tearing up the paper, and the results were just absolutely terrible. However, this year, with the proper quality supplies, I'm actually able to use the pens without the supplies fighting me back. But this is my goal for this year: to use a new, unfamiliar art supply and try to figure it out. Yeah, especially with 30-day art challenges, I think it's very important that you set your own personal goals. Inktober has a lot to do with stamina, and not everyone is able to complete these type of challenges simply because they haven't built themselves up to it yet. So creating your own mini challenges, things that you can realistically achieve that you might have to work hard for, I think is very important. Your goals should be tailored to your individual needs, whether it's completing 1 week of Inktober successfully, finishing the entire challenge, using a dip, brush, or lining pen, or even if you want to use a digital medium instead of a traditional one. I really believe completing the personal goals that you create for yourself for a 30-day challenge is probably more important than actually finishing the challenge itself. This leads into the next topic that I'll be talking a bit about, and that is the Inktober controversy. So as you all know by now, Inktober was created by a guy named Jake Parker back in 2009, and it didn't really seem to catch on very much until the last 3 or 4 years. Now you can't go on Instagram or YouTube or any sort of social media website without seeing a ton of ink drawings in October. And at one point I watched a video he created, and he talked about how he wanted to get better with his line art and make more confident, powerful line art strokes with his pens. So by doing 1 image a day in October, he was hoping to improve his skills. And the controversy comes in this year, in 2017, when Jake made a post on Twitter about Inktober, and this is what sparked the recent videos on YouTube by other artists. He said, quote, "The spirit of Inktober is self-improvement, and there's no better way to master your craft than to draw without a safety net. Working digitally usually means using Ctrl-Z a bunch so you can get your line just right, and that can enable someone to develop bad drawing habits. There's no feeling like making a permanent line and knowing you can't change it without consequence. I think that's how you improve and get better, because every ink line that's put down on your paper forces you to think, commit, and adapt. No one is going to stop you from doing Inktober on your iPad. Just know that you're missing out on the full experience of Inktober." End quote. So actually, in the beginning of this, the comment or the entire controversy wasn't that large. It wasn't until the YouTube videos created in response to the original comment made it into a much bigger thing than it actually was. So the original comment got 2,500 or so likes for the highest statistic that was shown on the website. And then the response video that was made to the original comment has 140,000 views for the highest statistic that was shown on that website. So to me, I feel like the whole controversy was this really small thing that kind of blew up only because other artists put a spotlight on it. But yeah, I personally don't see what Jake Parker said to be that big of a deal. Please keep in mind this is a response to a question that he had received, and it didn't come out of nowhere. And the question was simply if digital mediums were allowed in the challenge, and Jake clearly states that you can, but also thinks that you'll miss out on something if you have the ability to erase your lines. While he did make the challenge and is able to make the guidelines for the challenge, he even fully admits that you don't have to adhere to the rules he set forth. So to me, I don't really see how this is super offensive to people unless the viewer reads it in an offensive manner. For example, if you read the message he wrote and interpret it to mean that digital art is not real art, then you would be offended by this comment. Even though honestly, I don't think that's what he meant in the slightest. Jake Parker really doesn't strike me as the type of fellow to be like that towards people. I really think it has to do with how you interpret what is read. Some people say that his message was condescending or puts people down or things like that, but I think as a person who created the Inktober challenge, specifically to make his line art more decisive, he was explaining the importance of not having Ctrl-Z, and it just makes a whole lot of sense to me where he came from with his comment. But if we really look at what I was talking about earlier with personal goals versus the challenge itself, it seems that Jake's personal goal is to have more confident line art with confident strokes with his pen. So the challenge itself, Inktober, doesn't really encompass that goal specifically. It's not the confident line stroking challenge. So to me, if you wanted to do digital art for the challenge, that's your personal goal. And I think if we all look at it in that regard, everyone can participate in the challenge and also improve upon what they would like to improve upon. With all that being said, this is my 3rd year of Inktober, and to be completely honest with you, I am getting a little bored of it. So to me, this year, it's the personal goal that I set for myself that is keeping the interest in doing this challenge alive for me. Without that personal goal that I have set for myself, I don't think I would have participated in Inktober this year. But speaking of keeping a personal interest, this leads into my next segment. There are always so many people who want to do Inktober. Many artists get super hyped at the beginning, right? However, many of those artists who attempt the challenge don't seem to make it past week 1 or even finish week 1 for that matter. Already, a handful of my art friends gave up on Inktober, and this was after day 1 or day 2, and it really super bummed me out. Like, everyone was always so hyped up when it starts, and then they all start dropping like flies, and it's really disheartening to see so many people giving up so soon. So, perhaps if we stress the importance of our own personal goals more, and less about strictly adhering to the rules of Inktober, people will be able to accomplish more than they would have been able to accomplish before. Like, hey, maybe your goal for Inktober this year is to complete 1 full week of Inktober. And then maybe next year, your goal is now to complete 2 full weeks of Inktober. Or hey, maybe you want to do 1 week of Inktober and maybe you just want to do it digitally because that's the medium that you struggle with the most. And I think to have something that you can realistically accomplish and feel a sense of pride in is probably the best way to handle this challenge. But yeah, what do you guys think? How many of you are participating in Inktober this year? Are you behind, up to date, or ahead of schedule? Do you have any art friends trying this challenge? If so, how many have dropped out and how many are still going? What do you think of Jake Parker's comment? Did you find it to be hurtful? Do you agree that traditional media is necessary to participate in Inktober? And my final question, what personal goals do you have for Inktober this year? Is there any sort of pen that you're trying? Are you trying to do ink washes? Are you incorporating color? What are your goals? I hope you guys found this video to be just a little bit insightful, and please keep your chin up. Just because you're a day behind doesn't mean you have to stop drawing a picture a day. If you miss 1 day, you don't need to completely stop the challenge altogether. You can simply overlook that 1 day and continue on to the next one. Don't think of it as being behind, because then it's kind of like baggage that's attached to you. And the longer that you participate in the challenge, the more baggage you'll feel like you have attached, and the slower you'll go and the more disheartened you'll be. So don't be like that. It doesn't help you and it doesn't help anyone else. Keep your chin up and just keep going. Anyway, I gotta get going, like for real this time. I'll talk to you next week for another art video. Take care, guys.